This conference will now be recorded.
Good morning, friends. Welcome to GoOnlineTrainings.com. We were talking about triggers yesterday. What is the need for the trigger, and what are the features, and why do we need magic tables, and all these things we discussed yesterday, right? So, we have two types of triggers. One is called DDL, and the other one is DML triggers. And again, in DML triggers, there are two types. One is called after trigger. It is also called as a for trigger. And the second one is called instead of a trigger, right? So when the trigger is going to get fired, can we call the trigger explicitly? No. So can we call view explicitly? Yes. Can we call store procedure explicitly? Yes. Can we call function explicitly? Yes. But can we call trigger explicitly? No. So if you wanted to call the trigger, either you insert the data or delete the data, or you need to update the data in a table. And a trigger cannot be created on a column, it can be created on a table. Truncate does not invoke trigger. Truncate means deleting the data, right? So when the deletion is going on with the help of a truncate, then trigger is not going to be invoked even though there is a trigger there. Now, creating a trigger is something like this: create trigger, trigger name, on table name, type of the trigger. So whether it is after or instead of trigger, on which action I want to, you know, invoke the trigger. So insert, update, delete. You can give one action, two actions, or multiple actions, or any combinations. As begin, you need to write your code. Clear? So let me do a simple requirement. So uh, let me select star from the table name, and if the status equals to C, transaction should not be allowed for these customers, right? So if you're trying to insert any data for these guys, it should not be allowed for the closed accounts. So that is the important thing that I wanted to have it. Then 1 minute. Let me create one trigger, because we're going to be inserting the data into the table. But whenever you insert the data here, you need to check the status of this guy, whether that guy has status is 0 or not. Clear? So for this requirement, let me create a trigger. Create a trigger and say, so the trigger is stick status as begin. Sorry, on which table you need to create. The table name you need to mention, right? On which table. So on and type also. So on table called tmaster, and the type after trigger. Okay. After insert, update, or delete. Okay. So insert, update, or delete. So it can happen then as begin and end. So this is how you're going to be writing a trigger. Now we know that whenever you insert the data, what happens? Let me open my Excel. Let me take some data. We have account master table, account ID, name, and the C balance and the status. Okay, you may have a lot of other columns as well, but I am trying to take these three columns, right? So control C and control V. This will be transaction master, account ID, date of transaction, say transaction type, and you have a transaction amount. Okay, you have a transaction type and a transaction amount. So we were discussing Sneha. opened a account and by default which is operational. Two is Geeta also opened an account. Then we had Hari Krishna, he's also opened an account by by default all of them are operational. So whenever you do any transaction, 101 has done some transaction, let us say October 21st, 2019, he has done some transaction, right? Type of the transaction is a CD and a 10,000 or 1,000. So when you insert the data, I need to check whether this guy account is operational or not. Okay, if it is operational, now I wanted to also check. So the same amount has to be updated over there. Okay, so there are two things that I wanted to do it. So check the status as well as after doing the transaction, I wanted to update the balance as well here. So check status and update balance. Okay. Check status and update balance. Two things I'm going to be doing. So on the transaction master table. So now I know that if you, whenever you insert the data here, so what happens if you create a trigger on this? If you create a trigger on this, it's going to be creating what is called as a, a table called, it is going to go to RAM. This is your RAM, right? RAM means buffer. It's going to be creating two magic tables. Who's going to be creating a trigger when the when the insert happens here? So just now one guy is inserted a row. You went to the bank and you say that I wanted to deposit my cash. It will be creating two tables. One table is called, okay? One table is called inserted table. So whatever be the row that is there, so the same data is going to come here. So this table is called inserted table. Okay. And you will have one more table. The table name is called a deleted table. Okay. So there you will have only the blank columns, but there is no data there. Clear? So whenever you insert the data, update the data, delete the data, two magic tables will get created. If there is a trigger on the table, the trigger is going to be having the inserted data into inserted table, deleted data in the deleted table. If you update the data, old rows will be there in the deleted and new rows will be there in the inserted. Am I clear? So these are the things that you should understand. Now I know that which customer is doing, this customer is doing. So now I can go to programmatically, I can go where? I can go to a table called get customer info who's doing transaction. Okay. So I know that select star from the inserted table. I can go to this table. I will be able to get this guy's ID. Clear? So that data I wanted to have it. So which customer and what is the transaction type and transaction amount? Data of transaction I don't need. Okay. So what all I need? I need account ID, comma, transaction type and transaction amount. These three things I need. I need this, I need this, I need this. Okay. So I don't need a DOT. So using this transaction amount, so what I wanted to have, I wanted to put them in variables. Account ID, which is integer, declare transaction type, or you can give any name, type, simply type. Okay. Type is, we must go to which table? We must go to a transaction master table and see what is the data type for the transaction type. So which is character 3. Okay. Char 3. You need to give the same one. Okay. Declare, say simply amount, or you can say transaction amount is money. I created three variables. So let me have the data into the variable now. Clear? So type is going to be getting the data, the transaction amount is going to get like this. Now what happens? we are going to create three variables, nothing else. So variable 1 account ID, variable number 2 transaction type, variable number 3 this. So account ID means 101 will come here. So this is what is called account ID, and the transaction type is a CD, then amount is 1000. You will be able to get three blocks. Clear? Now first you need to verify by taking this number what is the status that you need to verify. Okay, you have already know that 101 is doing a transaction. You go to this table and you write what is the status. You find out the status. Clear? Now I go back. Now I wanted to find out the status, right? So here, so find out. So now you got the customer ID. Find out the status. How do you find out? So select status from the account master table where account ID, okay, account ID is equivalent to 101. So whatever you have it here, so that is available, so that you need to supply. Clear? So let me declare one more column, status. What is the data type for status? It is character 1. Say character 1. Clear? Now the status also, let me store it here. Now what is the status of 101? That we know it is operational. Now we need to write if and else condition. Okay, so if it is open, okay, so what is that we should do? If at the rate status is equivalent to, what is that? Operational. Only for this, okay, only for this. So begin, we should be able to do all of them. Okay, if everything is else, we print. Else we do begin, we print. You need to write the message, print your account is, okay, deactivated. Please call customer care. Okay, transaction is declined. Something like this you can say. So transaction declined. Clear? So like that we can inform. If everything is good, what is the next step? If everything is good, so then we need to update this one, right? So what is that? If the cash deposit is there, we need to update it. So you go there. So within that again, you need to write one more if condition. If the condition is at the rate type is equivalent to CD, if it is cash deposit, then what we should do? We should update which table? Account master table. Set whatever be the C balance is equivalent to C balance plus whatever be the transaction amount, okay, at the rate amount, where for whom account ID is equivalent to at the rate account ID for the same customer. Okay, so this is what you have to give it. If it is a transaction type equals to CD, you should be able to do it. Okay, so if it is not CD, it may be uh, CW, cash withdrawal as well, right? Else means it may be anything else. You can have begin and you can have end. So here also you can have begin and end. Begin and end. Okay. Okay. Now if it is not, if it is a cash withdrawal, so what we need to do? We need to go there and come back here and we need to say minus. That's it, nothing else. Clear? So these are the two things I have done it. So I have implemented the complete logic. Clear? If the status equals to 0, operational, then we can perform CD and everything. If else, what we are saying, your transaction is not declined, something like this, and click OK. So always we're going to be using these variables. So always you get the data from this table and store them in a variable. Now using the account ID primary key, you should be able to perform further operations. Then you can write if and else. That's it. Any trigger will have get the info and store them in variables. Then furtherly you can process. Clear? Whatever you want to process, only you should be able to write if and else. Now trigger is created. Let me create a trigger on which table I'm going to be creating on the transaction master table. Done. Trigger is created. Let me now insert. So this is my data. Now let me insert into transaction master values. Now the first one, automatic number, I shouldn't touch that. The next one is get date, right? So today's date. And 101 branch in which you're doing the transaction, let us say BR1, and the transaction, let us say CD, cash deposit, and check number is null, and it is, this is two nulls, okay? So I'm talking about this one. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, right? So you need to have amount 1000 and 1. So 1 is the bank executive number. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Clear? Now let me verify 101's balance. 101 is having 10,000 bucks. Okay. If I deposit, what should happen? So I should be able to have one data. Now, if I go, what is the last transaction? 804 already there. Okay. So we'll say where the transaction number is greater than 804 because 804 is till yesterday. So now you're going to get 805. So let me insert this one row affected. So this is 805. Clear? Now cash deposit is happened because of this. You see, he was having 10,000. Now it has become 11,000. So who has done this 11,000? Done by trigger. Now where is the trigger got created? Let me go to iBank. Now when you go to tables views and let me go to the table, let me go to transaction master. You have columns, keys, constraints, and below you have a triggers. So you can see there is a, let me delete this. Okay. So check status and update balance. This is a trigger. So you can also modify the trigger if you wanted to modify it like this, modify alter trigger, trigger name. Then you should be able to modify the complete trigger. Clear? Now, this is where you can see the trigger. So you need to open the table and you should find all the check constraints columns and everything and triggers. So indexes and statistics also you can find there. Now, I wanted to withdraw some cash. Cash withdrawal of 5,000. I wanted to do it, or 4,000. I wanted to do it. Now, let me show you this transaction. This is the one transaction. Now, currently 101 has 11,000. Now, you wanted to withdraw some cash. Clear? And one insert and one update is also going on. So, if you see the tables carefully. Now, one more transaction, you can see 11,000 minus 4,000, 7,000. Clear? It's happening properly. Now, I want to do it for this guy, Chaitanya. Chaitanya number is 105. So he wanted to do like this. And he would like to deposit, let us say, some 4,500 for cash deposit. Let me insert. Now you're saying Your account is deactivated. Please call our customer care. Transaction is declined. Clear? Because this row should not go there, right? Because it does not have any kind of a permission to insert the data because his account is deactivated. Now when you go and check what has happened, even though it is saying transaction is declined, the row got inserted. Have you seen this? The row is getting inserted here, but you're only getting the a message saying that your transaction is declined. But if you decline a transaction, you need to delete the row as well. For example, tomorrow, and this is closed. Okay, you're trying to do some cash deposit or something here. Okay, so tomorrow when you go, the new data is going to come. Tomorrow, Sneha wanted to go. She closed her account. So someday on 2020 next year, she wanted to again do cash deposit of, let us say, 2000. But now this record is going to come in this. Okay. Now we need to verify what is 101's account. It is closed. Closed means that the row has already gone. After that you're going and verifying this account is closed, and you're saying account is closed, you cannot do the transaction, but already the record is inserted. So what will you do this after inserting the data? Whatever you have done, you need to undo, right? So after inserting the data, you need to roll back the transaction. It is very, very important. Okay. So you're printing this, then you need to write one more script is called rollback. If you don't roll back, what will happen? You will simply get a message saying that your account is closed, but this row is already inserted there and it will be there in that table. Clear? So this trigger is called after trigger. After means what? So all the validations will happen. Data also will go there and sit. Then the trigger gets fired. Remember this. After trigger means what? The trigger is not going to be fired first in the transaction. You go inside your train, then you sit, a train starts, then the TTE come and checks, give me your ticket. So when you go and inside the train and you sit, then the TTE, train ticket examiner is going to come, is going to be asking you, show me your ticket, where you're going. So this is after you sitting, clear? So after the data going to the table, then the primary key, foreign key, everything will verify. Okay, if there is a failure because of the primary key, this row will not go at all. So primary key is saying there is a problem with the violation of primary key. Because of the primary key, the row did not go at all. So before trigger fires, so all validations are going to happen on this row. So what are the other validations? You may have primary key validation, unique key validation, check consent validation. All validations will happen. Then the row goes to the table and sits. Remember, after trigger is going to be fired, after insert, after delete, after update. What is the meaning? You go, you insert the data into the table, all validation will be taken place, everything is proper. Now the data also sits into the table. So then the trigger gets fired. So this is what is called after trigger. So the name is also beautifully given. After trigger means the trigger is going to be fired at last, right? If there is an accident, everybody will come, but at last the police is going to come after, right? So the after triggers are treated as a police triggers. So police is going to visit your place. If everything is over, then the police is going to come there and they do some kind of a inquiry for the accident. Clear? So after trigger is not going to fire first. After insert, after delete. So you deleted the data, then trigger gets fired. You updated the data, then trigger gets fired. Why? Because it is after trigger. It is not a, instead of a trigger. It is after insert. So the row already went here, the trigger got fired. Then it created two tables. Now you have to put the rollback compulsorily because you are saying blah, blah, blah. whatever be the data that is inserted here, that has to be deleted. But unfortunately, we did not put the row is here. Clear? It is very, very dangerous. So let me delete this row, delete from the transaction master, where because it does not have 7. This row has to be deleted. Okay, you cannot do anything. It is saying now it is deleted. Clear? So what I should do? You need to implement what is called as a rollback here. Okay, let me alter this trigger. Let me alter the trigger and modify it. Modified. Now you go. This guy wanted to withdraw or deposit some cash. Let us say some 1250. Now you see what happens. Now you're saying your account is deactivated. Please call customer care. This red message is going to come because you are rolling back. You are rolling back. Whatever be the row got inserted, that is got deleted. Now this row is not there. Have you seen this? This row is not there. Compulsorily, you need to verify this. You need to verify and write rolling back. Okay, now what I wanted to do, I wanted to do a cash withdrawal. Okay, cash withdrawal. This guy has a 7,000 bucks. Who's that guy? 101 has 7,000 bucks. But I wanted to withdraw, let us say 8,000. Okay, this guy has 7,000 clear balance. That much amount I can withdraw. But I wanted to withdraw 8,000 for from 101's account. Can we do that? Now it is saying yes. So no bank will give you like this, but we have a bug in the code. So it is showing minus 1,000. So we need to have one more validation whether this customer has sufficient balance or not. That logic is we missed it. For especially for the cash withdrawal, you wanted to have one more validation. The validation, I think we did not write it here. But especially for the cash deposit, we're simply updating else block. Else block is a CW. Cash deposit means good. Else per the withdrawal block, you need to verify what is the amount that guy has. So that logic we did not implement. So that logic we need to implement. So what is that? Check for the availability funds. Okay. Check the balance. To check the balance, what I need to do, select C balance from account master table. So I wanted to have what is balance. Okay. 101 is doing currently. I wanted to know his balance. Okay. His balance, we could say, for example, this is operational and she has deposited, two things. It will become 3,000. Now she wanted to withdraw on, let us say, November 1st, 2020, cash withdrawal of, let us say, 5,000. Okay, so the row has gone here. Then immediately two tables will be created. One is called inserted, the second one is called deleted table. Now this row is going to go there. Clear? Now 101 cash withdrawal 5,000. Now I wanted to verify 101's balance. So how do I verify? So give the number and get the balance. It's very, very simple. So this is one. If you have 101, you will be able to see some balance. Or if you have 102, you can get this balance. Right? So this guy is having this much of a balance. That I wanted to keep them in one more variable. So I wanted to create a one more variable called, say, C balance or balance. You can give any name. Balance is money. So this I'm going to be putting into one more variable. Clear? So I have two variables. So I have a lot of variables. One variable is called transaction amount. Amount is, let us say, what is the amount she was having? 5,000. Transaction amount is 5,000. And what is the C balance? That is 3,000. That is available in one more value. No, you compare easily. So transaction amount 5,000, 3,000, you compare. So because you're putting into variables, you 5,000, this is amount, this is what is called balance. That's it. Comparison can be done very, very easily. Now we can go and verify the comparisons. Okay. Now what is the comparison? The comparison is, again, if one more if condition that you wanted to write. If, what is the condition? If the transaction amount, so this amount is greater than or equals to balance, right? If it is greater than or equals to this, then it is fine. You should be able to do these things. Else, again, one more else block here. Else, again, you can say begin and you need to do it. Again, you need to roll back because already the data got inserted. Now you need to give proper messages. Okay. So you do not have, okay, uh, or you can say insufficient funds, something like this. Sufficient funds in your account, okay, in your account. That's it. So transaction decline and roll back. If there is a funds available, then we can update this. So this logic need to be implemented. Clear? Let me go and alter this. So let me go and just click on execute. I have altered it. Now I go. So the cash withdrawal is done. So this is very, very dangerous. So let me deposit some cash to this guy. Let us deposit some 12,000 cash. Now you can see what is his balance. Clear? So 12,000 cash and 11,000 is this guy has. Now again, I wanted to take 18,000. Clear? 1 minute.
This conference will now be recorded.
Oh, sorry guys. Sorry, sorry. Okay. Now let me insert. I have written the code. So there's a small problem here. So instead of greater than, I need to put less than in this. Clear? So that is one modification I should do it here. Then I have altered the code. Okay. So again, now I wanted to, check. I am doing some kind of a testing here. Now 101 has, what is the balance? 18,000. Now I wanted to withdraw 20,000. Is having 18,000. I wanted to, he wanted to withdraw a 20,000. or you can have any other amount. Let me say 19,000. Okay, this guy is having, this is the balance. Now these are the transactions that we have. Let us say 812. Mhm. Okay, now let me execute this. When I execute, insufficient funds in your account, transaction is declined. The transaction ended in the trigger, blah, blah, blah. Now, if you see carefully, this guy data did not gone there. 19,000 record is not there. And this guy is having 18,000 only in his account because he's trying to withdraw more than that. Now we can let him withdraw 8,000. So you can do that. So 8,000 we can withdraw, his balance becomes zero. Now it doesn't have any funds, but you wanted to again, let us say some $1,000 you wanted to have it. Is it allowed? It is not allowed. Clear? So he has to deposit some cash of, let us say, some 2,450. Now it can happen, right? So now this guy is having 2,450 and this is a transaction is gone there. Clear? So cash deposits are happening, cash withdrawals are happening, status also you were able to check, and this is how you should be able to easily write the triggers. Clear? So whenever you call the trigger, whenever you insert the trigger data or update the data, automatically the trigger gets fired. Clear? So this is what is called after trigger. After means after insert, the trigger gets fired. So before that, primary key, check and primary key validations, foreign key validations, everything will occur. So trigger may fail, the row may fail to come into the table because of the primary key violation, or it may be foreign key violation. So if the data does not come here, the trigger will not get fired at all because the row did not come to the, come into the, row, come into the table because of a violation of primary key constraint. For example, you wanted to go to airport. So gate number one, there is a check. The gate number two, there is a check. Gate number three, there is a check. The trigger is there. Gate number one, you failed because of something else. You don't have, proper passport. So what will happen? You don't go into the airport, right? So gate number three, there is a trigger. The trigger will not get fired because you are failed in the gate number one itself. Could be primary key violation, foreign key violation, something like that. So after going into the airport, then you sit in the, everything, then there is a validation again may happen. You may have drugs, or people came to know that you have the problem. So they were checking and they may call you for the verification. Okay. So after going in, after sitting into the airport, they may have a doubt. So, or they may do one more validation that is going to be done by the after trigger. Clear? It is very, very important that you should be able to perform all these things without fail, all these validations without fail. And after triggers, we're going to be having much more after triggers. But what my suggestion is, you create one trigger for one insert, one trigger for update, and one trigger for delete. You include maximum operations there. If the code is too much, then you can split. You can create multiple triggers, but try to accommodate in one or two triggers. Otherwise what happens, each and every trigger will get a fired and it will create magic tables. And if you have 10 triggers, 10 magic tables will get created because triggers also will not get called parallelly, one by one. If you have three triggers, one trigger will get fired, it will create a magic table, then it will execute, then the next trigger will get fired, then it will create again magic tables, blah blah blah, again the next trigger will get fired. If you have more than one trigger, all the triggers are not going to be fired parallelly. It is not going to create one magic table. Every trigger going to create its own magic tables. Clear? When the trigger execution is over, the magic tables are deleted. From where? From the RAM. So this is from the RAM. So everything is clean. So that's what you need to understand always. Am I clear, guys? This is very, very important. So this is what is called, the after trigger. So we have one more trigger called instead of trigger as well. We have one more trigger called instead of trigger as well. So after trigger can be created only on tables. Multiple insert, update, delete triggers can be created. Use sp underscore set trigger order to order the triggers firing sequence. As we discussed yesterday, you may have 10 triggers, but out of 10 triggers, I would like to call the trigger number 7th as the first trigger, trigger number 8th one as a second trigger. I wanted to have the sequence. So if you don't give in any sequence, order in which you have created in the same order, triggers are going to be called sequentially, one by one, one by one, one by one. But if you wanted to call, you can use the set trigger order stored procedure to order the trigger firing sequence. Clear? So the trigger is getting fired lost in the transaction. Transaction means here inserting the data, updating the data, deleting the data. So after you insert, the trigger will get fired. After you delete, trigger gets fired. After you update, trigger will get fired. Clear? So the trigger is getting fired, lost in the transaction, lost in the work. Now, in Oracle terminology, after trigger is called as a post trigger. Post trigger and pre trigger. Pre trigger means before insert, before update, before delete. That is called pre triggers and post triggers in Oracle terminology. But in SQL Server terminology, it is after trigger and instead of trigger. Clear? So after you putting the data, after you deleting the data, the post trigger is going to be executed. So Oracle terminology, which are called post triggers. So which are in SQL Server terminology, which are called as after or called as a for trigger. You can say after, or you can also write for here. Okay. You can also say after, or you can also say for. So anything you can mention. Clear? But in Oracle terminology, this is what is called a post trigger. So after the transaction, the trigger gets fired. So this is how you can understand, then you can implement. You can write after or for anything is fine. Clear? Yeah. Now, when is that we are going to be using instead of a trigger? Let me give you one example for that as well. So instead of a trigger can be created on tables and views, and after trigger can be created only on tables. This is one difference. The next difference we'll talk only one instead of trigger of a given type, insert, update, delete. So you cannot create a multiple, instead of triggers. And this trigger gets fired instead of a transaction. So these are called pre-triggers. So if you're trying to insert the data, the insert will not happen, trigger gets fired. You're trying to update the data, update will not happen, the trigger gets fired. You're trying to delete the data, delete will not happen, the trigger gets fired. So before the transaction, these are called pre-triggers. Okay. So we have post triggers and we have a pre-triggers. Clear? So we can have these two types of triggers. In Oracle terminology, this is what is called a pre-trigger. Pre means before the transaction. Before the transaction. What is the transaction here? Insert, update, delete. So when you insert the data will not go to the table, the trigger gets fired. The data will not get deleted from the table, the trigger gets fired. If you create a instead of a trigger, let me give you one beautiful example for this, where exactly we're going to be using. Okay, so people are inserting the data, sorry, people are inserting the data cash deposit of 102 Geeta. She's now inserted some 4,000 bucks. Everything is cool. Now Hari also on some day, this guy is also deposited some, let us say 10,000 bucks. Okay. Now everything is properly happening. Now government of India or government of US wanted to understand the people who are doing heaviest transactions. That is what the government of India wanted to understand. That information they were clearly telling, log into one more table. The table columns will be as it is, but the Table name is called High Transaction Master. Clear? Government of India clearly telling to all banks of India, if any customer is doing any transaction greater than 50,000, okay? If the transaction amount is greater than 50,000, whether it is a CW or CD, doesn't matter. If the transaction amount is 50,000, I need those details to be submitted to Bank of, the Indian government or US government. So this is a circular came to all banks. What is the circular? If any customer is doing any transaction, whether cash deposit amount, cash withdrawal amount, if it is greater than 50,000, please send those records to us. And for that, what banks are implementing, they are going to create one more table. Now, normally you insert the data here. You insert the data here. Now, instead of inserting the data here, so what we do, we verify. We verify, for example, you're going to insert 104, one record supposed to go to this table, 103. See, Hari, on some day you wanted to have November 22, 2020 cash deposit of 65,000. It trying to insert. He went to the bank, given 65,000. This row supposed to go here. So when the insert supposed to happen, there is a trigger will get fired. The insert will not take place. Clear? Insert, you're trying to insert the data, there is instead of trigger that is going to be fired. Then the trigger will verify what is the amount. If it is less than 50,000, insert this row into this table. If not, insert this row into this table. So who's going to decide? The trigger is going to be deciding. So trigger is a instead of trigger, pre-trigger, because I should not insert the data first. Then again, I should not verify. Is it greater than 50,000 or less than 50,000? Then if it is less than 50,000, the row can go there. If it is a greater than 50,000, delete all the data from here. Again, insert into here. So why should I insert the data here? Then delete. If I create a after trigger, the row will go, then you're going to validate. Okay. But if you create a instead of trigger, the row is not going to go there. When the row is going, immediately the trigger gets fired. So whatever be the row trying to go, this row is trying to go there, right? So this row is going to be going to the inserted table because trigger is getting fired. So all the columns as it is will be there. So this row is going to go to inserted table. Now you will have one more deleted table. So inside that you don't have any date, but column names will be there as it is. Clear? So when you have instead of a trigger, so when you try to insert the data will not go, trigger will get fired, and complete row which supposed to go to the table, that row will be now into the inserted table, right? Now using this amount, you decide if it is greater than 50,000, take the complete values from here, dump into this, else you dump into this. Clear? So here I'm going to be using what is called as a instead of a trigger. Clear? Instead of a trigger. So sometimes you can create a pre-trigger instead of a trigger, or sometimes you can have a post trigger. But instead of triggers can be can be created only on tables and views, but for one action, one instead of trigger. So one action is insert, one trigger for insert, one trigger for update, one trigger for delete. Maximum three triggers instead of triggers you can have on table. But if you thinking about after triggers, you can have unlimited triggers on the after triggers on the table, but creating many triggers is very, very bad. So I wanted to create one a high transaction master table. So how can we create a one more table? So creating is very, very simple. So select start from the transaction master table. Okay, I would like to create one more table without no data. So I'll give one false condition where 1 equals to 2 is a false condition. I don't get any data, right? So this is the data. I create a new table into, say, high transaction master. So I create one more table like this. Now, 0 rows affected. You should be able to create one blank table very, very easily. Okay. This is a physical table. Now we know how to use into, right? How to use into and create the table. Now this is the table name. I should be able to create a blank table. Clear? So created, and you can also go and refresh this. Now, what is the requirement? This is I transaction master. It is a blank table. Columns are as it is. Now, you can also see the table structure. How to see the table structure? SP underscore help table name. So all the columns, data types as it is will be there, and the account number is integer, and there is an identity column because original table got identity column. Inside the HTML also you got integer, which is identity now. Clear? So I cannot insert the data into this table manually. So you should check. So what are the data types? What is the primary key? What is the foreign key? Everything you should be able to check. And what is the identity column here? So by checking SP underscore help table name, you will come to know what are the primary keys, foreign keys, lot of things. But so I should be able to uh, now decide and create one trigger. The trigger I'm going to be creating this time is, so create, so high volume transactions. Okay, high volume transactions trigger. Okay, the trigger name is called this. So on this table, this is what is called instead of trigger. Okay, so whether it is inserting or updating, deleting, so not for updating and deleting, or you can say update and delete also. So this is going to get fired based on this. Clear? So what I wanted to do, delete all these things. This is nonsense. The complete thing I wanted to delete, and begin. So this is also I don't need it. Okay, and these variables I may need it, so I will be able to use. Otherwise, we can also declare this. So we don't need these variables as well. This is the code you're supposed to write. The first thing, get the customer info. Okay, get the customer info. So how to get the customer info? Because you are going to be inserting the data into this table. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Clear? You're supposed to get all the complete data. So you say select star from the inserted table. Now all the data I wanted to capture it, right? All columns I would like to capture it. So what are the columns? This guy has it. Okay. So when you drag and drop, so this is the column list. DOT, account number, branch ID, all these things we're going to be getting it. So for each and everything, you declare variables. Okay, put them in variables. So declare DOT is date and time. Okay, declare account ID is integer. Declare branch ID. So you can say branch ID is character 3. You can just write character 3 and declare transaction type. Okay, so transaction type is character 3. Control C, control B. All these things you can say. Declare because I wanted to get the complete data. Check number is null. Whatever you have it, you should be able to have it. At the rate check number, this is integer, right? Integer. Declare at the rate check date. It is date and time. And declare at the rate transaction amount is money, that we can check it here. Then last one, declare at the rate UID is integer. UID is integer. That's it. Okay. So these are the data that you need to get them into a variables first. All this data, put them into a variables. Because getting the complete information and check number, check date, transaction amount, and UID. All the data you're capturing because you wanted to insert this complete data into either the first table or in the second table, right? You need to capture everything. So all the data is now available. Now you need to check the condition. What is the condition? Condition is very simple. If only one condition we have, if the transaction amount is, that's it. If it is a greater than 50,000, then I say insert into HTM values. Okay. So completely you should be able to insert as it is. So remove all these things. DOT, comma ACID, comma branch ID. That's it. You need to simply come and put all these parameters, nothing else. And okay. So nothing complex, we're just putting all the column names here. That's it. Okay. If the transaction amount is like this, insert into this, else insert where? Insert the row into this table. What is the table? The T master table. That's it. Okay. Now you say go, because we're capturing completed data. After capturing complete data, this is the condition that I wanted to have it. Are you clear? So create a trigger, high volume transaction, blah, blah, blah. So get complete data into a variables, and only one condition we have, that I'm going to be doing it. This is instead of a trigger. So let me execute. Now remember to insert some value, cash deposit of, let me show you some data, right? So it is having, if it is cash deposit of 30,000 bucks or 40,000 bucks will be available in this table, right? If it is HTM, no data is available. Okay. Now let me have 90,000 bucks. Now you see the data is gone to this table. This table does not have any data. Have you seen this? So 10190,000 record is not here. Have you seen this? So this has gone to this table. So he has done that instead of a trigger. So in very rarest situations, we're going to be calling what is called as a instead of a trigger. Clear? And even though you're inserting the data into this table or this table, his account balance has to be updated, right? So because 90,000 got deposited, now this account also balance to be updated. So we had to create one after trigger as well here on this table now. We had one after trigger because it is updating the balance into this. And we should also create one more after trigger for the update balance and check the status, blah, blah, blah. Then it is going to be updating. Clear? So all the triggers are available in your iBank. Go to your table, transaction master table. Now you can go to triggers instead of triggers, and every trigger will be visible there. Clear? If you wanted to modify, you can modify. If you wanted to drop the trigger, you can say drop trigger name. Okay, trigger name, that's it. So if you wanted to drop this trigger, so you can go anytime, control C and control V, trigger will get dropped. That's it. So drop the trigger is dropped. So you can go simply go and refresh it. Now you will be able to see only one trigger, the other trigger is dropped. Clear? If you wanted to alter the trigger anytime, right click on this and modify, or you can also say sp underscore help text and the trigger name. Okay, what is the trigger name? Trigger name is this. So you should be able to get the complete trigger code. So this is the complete trigger code. Anytime you should be able to get like this. And if you wanted to alter, you can alter, but remember to keep use iBank there. Otherwise, this trigger may be created elsewhere. And writing, whenever you write a trigger or code, you need to write who's the author and what is the trigger is going to be doing. All this information you're supposed to write that I did not write. What is the purpose? What is the trigger? What's the author? Blah, blah, blah. Everything you should be able to write and create a trigger like this. Clear? So this is very, very important. Triggers are very, very dangerous. Why dangerous? Because if you have more triggers, when you insert the data, update the data, delete the data, trigger will get fired. You think about ETLs, people who know SSIS. So what will happen? SSIS is going to dump the data into the triggers, into the tables. If there's a trigger for each and every row, trigger will get fired. Now SSIS will become very, very slow. SSIS become very, very slow. So if you wanted to disable the trigger, not the delete, I would like to disable the trigger for some time. Clear? So there is a right click and you can say disable this trigger. So trigger is not going to be fired for some time. Okay. So you can also disable this trigger. Okay. And you can also disable the check constraint. For example, I don't want to use the check constraint for some time. So I wanted to disable. Do you have any disable here? There is no disable. Good. But triggers can be disabled and it can be enabled if you wanted to enable it. Because if you're performing a lot of bulk operations, lot of 1,000 rows, 2,000 rows when you're inserting, when if the trigger is there, it will take a lot of time. Clear? So people may ask you, can I can I disable a trigger, enable a trigger? Yes, you can do the disable and enable trigger. So right click and disable, or you can write this code as well. Alter table and disable trigger, the trigger name. Alter table name, transaction master, enable trigger, trigger name. So using a code, you can disable and enable a trigger. Triggers are very, very bad for the performance. Am I clear? In your case studies, if you go to your case studies, you will have multiple triggers are visible, right? If you go to Indian Bank case study, multiple triggers are visible. So maximum times you create a after trigger. In one or two situations, you create a instead of trigger. the situation I just told you, right? If you go to Indian bank case study, you have multiple, these are the triggers. No transaction should be allowed. Okay, so this is a trigger I implemented. When transaction is altered, this you can implement. More than 3 cash withdrawals, you can implement separate trigger. Okay, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. So this is the one I have just now implemented. If the transaction amount is greater than 50,000, the same should be inserted into high value transaction table. You create one table and do this. This is, I've done it. So let me make it to green. But remaining 15, 16, the other things, you are going to be doing it on your own. Clear, guys? And one more question people may ask you. Okay, what is the question? If I'm inserting thousands of rows, so I may insert one row at a time. I may insert 1,000 rows at a time. So how many times the trigger gets fired? If I insert 1,000 rows at a time, 1,000 times will it get fired, or one time will it get fired in SQL Server? Okay. So there are two things. Trigger can be fired in two ways. One is called per row, per row basis. For example, if you're inserting 1,000 rows, 1,000 times the trigger can fire, and there is per statement. Per statement means the statement means the code the code may have 1,000 inserts. Clear? So that is called one statement. So even though you insert 1,000 rows at a time, if you say per statement, the trigger will get fired only once. Clear? You're inserting 100 rows at a time. How many times the SQL Server triggers are going to be fired? Is it 100 rows 100 times, or 100 rows are going at a time? It is one statement. 100 rows is equivalent to one statement, one block. Will it get called only one time? So in SQL Server, we don't have a per row. This is not there. Okay, SQL Server is only per statement. If you're inserting one row, then once the trigger gets fired. If you're inserting at a time 1,000 rows, the trigger gets fired only one time, and all the inserted data will be gone into the inserted table. Then you can use a loop and read row by row, row by row, row by row, and try to do your calculations. Clear? So SQL Server cannot allow per row. Per row means if you're inserting 1,000 rows at a time, I'm talking about not one by one, at a time. So it is not going to be called 1,000 times. It is per row or per statement. But inside Oracle, you can specify this as well as this as well. So that option SQL Server does not give you. SQL Server by default per statement only. Clear? At a time, you may insert one row one time. At a time, when you insert 5,000 rows, only one time the trigger is going to be executed, not 5,000 times. Clear? So this is also one more thing that you should know. But Oracle is going to give you options. You can mention per row, you can mention per statement. When you say like that, the trigger is acting like that. Clear, guys? So this is, triggers are quite bad for the performance. Why? It's going to create a lot of tables if you have more and more triggers. So that is the reason many people will say triggers are bad for the performance. But even though they are bad, we cannot, avoid them. So for the automation purpose, so for the validations purpose, who's going to be doing this? Definitely trigger should only do this, right? So trigger has to be implemented, not heavily, at least minimally. So people will say when you're inserting bulk data, bulk update, bulk insert, you disable the triggers for some time. Otherwise, what will happen for all these inserts, the triggers gets fired automatically. It will slow down the insert, update, delete statements. So you stop the triggers, insert the data, then you enable the triggers. Whatever the trigger is supposed to do, that you need to do it manually, because you stopped the trigger is not working now. What you need to do? So after the data inserted into the table, then the whatever the work the trigger is supposed to do, that work you need to do it either in a stored procedure or manually you should do it. Clear?
So people would do. So people will say, I wanted to increase the writing capability. What should I do? Disable the triggers, disable the indexes. I wanted to perform my ETL operations faster. What should I do? Disable the triggers, disable the indexes, disable the statistics onto the tables. Clear? So these are the simple things, but very, very good one. So you can have complete programming can be written if and else, everything can be written as part of triggers, and triggers are pretty much easy. Then if you're talking about the difference between after trigger and instead of trigger, after trigger you can have multiple triggers per table, but here for one action one trigger, maximum three triggers you can have it. The second one is after triggers can be created only on tables, but instead of triggers, tables and columns, tables and views. Okay, these are the two differences. One more difference: instead of trigger will get fired first in the transaction. After trigger gets fired last in the transaction. Clear? Thank you, guys. Okay.